Call your friends. Oh, geez, they actually turned me on. Apologies for that. I was just saying, we're not going to start until every seat is filled, so call your friends, make sure the whole audience is here. Just kidding. Thank you for coming at this hour. We know we're competing with, granted, the dinners are much later in Spain, but we know we're competing with potential, at least appetizers and cocktails. So thank you for joining us today. We'll get started in just a couple of minutes, okay, folks?
Carlos.
Come on in, take a seat.
Carlos. A ver, está jugando ahí el 3, el 5 y el 6.
Oh, man.
Porque el 4 me lo han devuelto, no sé por qué.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
El jugador lo lleva el jugador que es moderador. Uno que lleva una camisa roja. El uno no.
For the folks in the back, not to scare you too much, but we're hoping to keep it relatively interactive. So feel free to come up a little bit closer. Some of these folks did. We appreciate that. That's cheating. You're Dell. But still, thank you for doing that.
Carlos, ¿está claro? Exactamente. No, 3, 4, 5 no. 3, 5.
I see a couple more stragglers. We'll give them just 1 or 2 minutes, folks. This is the time to send your tweets about the anticipation of excitement of this panel. If you need that time, if you need that extra time for that, we won't object to it. Oh, it looks like they think we've already started. Don't worry, no need to focus on me. We're just waiting on the last couple of folks. But they did brighten it up quite a bit, didn't they? Yeah. Okay, great. I see the last couple of folks coming in. Everybody ready to get started? Good to go? All right. Again, thank you so much for joining us at this hour. I know it's a little bit later. It's early as far as Spain is concerned when it comes to dinner, though, so appreciate your time today. So what we have today here is a panel discussion for you. It's titled, How AI and Machine Learning Builds a Better Manufacturing Process. Just out of curiosity, show of hands, who's actually someone that's involved in the context of a factory? You work in a factory. You produce something. You personally. Okay, great. All right, so we have at least a couple of folks who maybe, would you call yourselves more on the OT side, the operational technology side of things? Let me ask the question this way. Who's OT? So you're actually, putting things into practice, you're making sense of and using some of the IoT stuff that's being discussed here at the event. Show of hands. How about the IT side? You're keeping the lights on, you're doing some of the infrastructure, network, and plumbing. Okay, and then who's like, I don't know, I choose not to answer that question. At least, and some people have no ability to raise their arm. That's okay. I did see a couple of you guys, but that's fine. But anyway, I'm Calvin Smith. I'm going to be kind of leading you on the journey through the discussion today. I just rejoined Dell as of literally yesterday. So I spent quite a bit of time over there before, originally looking after global organic innovation and then some of the IoT strategy stuff with my partner in crime here, Dr. Tibet. Then went over to Wipro for a while and led a team focused on partner ecosystem enablement, and then just came back to Dell. So again, kind of new on that side of things, but because I'm the moderator, it's not about me today. We've got a phenomenal panel assembled. I think what we're going to do is, just to kick off, kind of go down the panel, do some quick intros, and then as I mentioned, we have some questions that are preset, but we want to make this a discussion and dialogue with you guys to the best of our ability. So I hope you came prepared with some kind of idea of something you want to get out of this panel, and if we don't touch on it, then please do make sure that we do. Without further ado, Dr. Tibet, do you mind kicking off the intros?
Thanks, Calvin. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Syed Tibet. As Calvin mentioned, we worked together early in the days of IoT, at least as we know it today, 5-6 years ago. And since then, within Dell, I've been focused on IoT and AI strategy, but also specific use cases and areas of focus like autonomous driving and smart mobility. Yeah. It's a pleasure to be here. Looking forward to this discussion, Calvin.
Thank you, Syed. Erkut.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm the head of IT in Hugo Boss Manufacturing in Turkey. And I've been working in the factory for roughly 10 years. And before then, prior to my current position, I was also in another manufacturing facility, which is Philip Morris. So my professional life is all the time in production, in manufacturing. So for the last 4 years, I've been involved in IoT, AI, system integration, robotics, autonomous robotics, and so on. So glad to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Kari.
Thank you. Yeah, so my name is Kari Teroham. I run the startup business in Elisa. Elisa is the biggest Finnish telecom company and the third largest IT company in Finland. And what we do generally in a telco is that you can think that we run a huge company called Finland. So we run 50% of all the telecom services in Finland. So if we fail, Finland fails. We cannot start the Monday morning with the morning shift with the supervisors starting the day that, whoa, we had a problem yesterday. Half of the Helsinki were down yesterday for 3 hours. Doesn't work like that. So what we do is we have automated everything. So we analyze more than 100,000 transactions per second. We have fully automated self-optimized networks and so forth and so forth. And that know-how we are now delivering to our enterprise customers, so manufacturing customers, to doing the same thing. What we have had our own digital transformation started from 11 years ago. So that's kind of the background, what I'm representing.
Thank you, Kari. Yeah, and Thanos, please.
Hello, my name is Thanos Kontopoulos. I'm coming from a company that's called Air Liquide. We're industrial gases and services producers, a company with more or less 20 billion euro a year turnover. And from my personal background has started in operations. I worked in operations, so in our assets for about 13, 14 years. Then I moved to R&D, where I'm now, and I'm leading a lab that's called computational data science. We have, as the name says, quite a lot of data scientists these late years, and developing the machine learning and AI in close collaboration with our operations.
Excellent, thank you. And one last question for the audience. I promise I'll stop picking on you maybe towards the end, but like I said, a little bit interactive. For those who raised their hand and said that they're in manufacturing, show your hand again if you're doing something, you're experimenting with machine learning. Deep learning tends to be more the back end, but any of these acronyms, ML, DL, AI, are you doing something in that regard? We got a couple. Oh, awesome. Thank you for being participative, and there's quite a few. So it's kind of this weird golden unicorn that a lot of people are moving towards and trying to do things in, but when you really start to kind of separate the wheat from the chaff, it's hard to find really good concrete use cases and examples. So we're going to dig into that today. I'd love to get you guys to kind of share some of your examples and what you're doing too, and then again, see how we can broaden and generalize it for manufacturing across multiple different verticals, right? But without further ado, I mean, we talk about the origins of manufacturing. We talk about, certainly manual labor. Humans are not going away anytime terribly soon. Automation is rampant in a manufacturing context. But at the same time, there's been a lot of evolution and changes in the AI world, so to speak, and ML, and kind of pushing down to the edge. I'm wondering, Saeed, maybe you can kick us off, but let's talk a bit about how are things evolving to the point where I would guess that 5 years ago, we wouldn't have seen many hands raised when I asked if you're experimenting with that in manufacturing.
Yeah, absolutely, Calvin. Thank you. Having been in the AI world, I can't even count. I'll be way too old, right? So you know how old I am. But really, AI with the way it used to be before, with the decision support and logic-based system, deductive, inductive, etc., has been used in manufacturing, has been in fraud detection, has been used in a lot of other areas for the last 30 years, right? Particularly the last 20 years, I would say, with the internet in the early 90s, it started to get a little bit more socialized. However, in the last 5 years, particularly with IoT, I would say, that gave it, with machine learning, and particularly with deep learning and certain techniques that became a lot more available. And that's another topic that's really important. Open source and adoption of these technologies is very important. I believe that IoT enabled that a little bit more than it was. So that evolution started to get a little bit more successful because we have access to compute and information storage, a lot of data management techniques and capabilities through IoT and sensors to capture that information. So I think, so to the points that were made by my colleague earlier, and the example of Finland, if you're dealing with 50% of the country, you better have your processes working properly. And machine learning itself being something that came from operations research and statistics particularly, it's straightforward, it works very well in specific examples, but deep learning enabled more capability. particularly with unsupervised learning, using a lot of different algorithms, a lot of frameworks that are out there, open source, that you can play with, and you'll easily get in trouble if you don't take care of your data. And I always literally caution about that. I'm sure a lot of you know what the cost is, both in terms of resources and the dollar or the euro, depending what you're using. Yeah. And to that point, in critical or mission-critical environments, that's really important. On the other hand, when it works, it definitely does the job and enables you to get to another level. Now, having that as horizontal technologies, I think that evolution is taking us to the next level, where we're combining things like machine learning, deep learning, and now going next to the reasoning system. Right. A few weeks ago, one of the leading scholars and researchers, actually I would say the leader, he just won last year or the year before the Turing Award, Bangio, for those of you who know him, he's in Montreal, recognized that deep learning in itself is not going to work. Machine learning in itself is not going to work in the real world for certain types of applications. Right. So when you get there, you add more capabilities, but again, we need that open source tooling, we need those capabilities of adoption, so that all of our audience and the people who are actually working in factories and supporting different business models can actually exercise and train their systems to do that. Yeah.
Makes great sense. And I'm curious, especially from the manufacturing context and perspective, you know, as the OT rises up to kind of meet the IT, what are your thoughts on that? I mean, granted, the tech has evolved, but what are your thoughts on how, you know, the manufacturing ecosystem has evolved over time to be able to actually make use of the change in the IT side? Any perspectives? Anyone that has a thought. And if not, then I would certainly ask the people that raised their hands a minute ago, you're not only eligible for questions, but also comments or answers, just for what it's worth. I warned you.
From the manufacturing point of view, yeah, of course, we use quite a lot AI and ML, machine learning strategies. Yeah. And formerly, we were working just collecting the data and using those data just to manage the shop floor. But right now, we are also thinking about the future. You can just right now manage your shop floor, but what about tomorrow? What about next week? So this is the magic point that we are working on right now. And we have quite a lot of use cases, which we can mention in detail. And of course, predicting the future is something different than today. Because today you are just collecting the data, creating some lists, some reports, taking some actions, but these are all human behavior. But what about the future prediction? If you are able to predict the future, then you can change the game. This is something like a game changer. So maybe next question, I may a little bit talk about our use cases and the benefits to us.
Okay, makes sense. Well, let's come back to the before we get too deep. I want to get into the use cases, because I think that's what everyone cares about. But let's talk a little bit more about enablement. You talked about the trends in the tech. You talked about some of the OT side to be able to receive those trends and make use of them and do things like predictive or conditional maintenance. But Kari, maybe you can give us a bit of a discussion on distributed architectures. Where does this stuff all fit in? How much of this stuff should we be doing in the cloud versus, you know, in the core on some kind of converged appliance in a data center on-site or on-prem versus in a gateway versus embedded? There's a lot of terms and a lot of potential places to be running compute and networking and storage. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a good question. And what we see is that there's kind of a, not black and white. So what we see, it's in a hybrid world. So you have things running on the edge in the manufacturing site or site. So if you think like telecom network in itself, so we own all the hardware. So we sell all the services as a service. So we have approximately 5 million connected assets, which we monitor in real time, all the time. We know exactly what is happening right now, what is going to happen tomorrow and next week. So to do that, you cannot have it all in cloud. And the 5G is going to be a great technology. It's not just that you have the better speed on the network. So by the way, we're the first European telco who has commercial 5G networks running in Finland. So the 5G base stations will be running analytics on the base stations. So more you have base stations in the future, So you can build up your non-licensed 5G networks in your factories, in your campus area, and you can run in the edge all the analytics, so stream analytics and so forth. But then you need to have the cloud, because then you need to store the data and you need to further analyze the data. You cannot do that all in the edge. So we're in a very interesting position at the moment. The world will change. So if you think the autonomous driving, the one key enabler for that will be the 5G, because then you would have a base station in all light balls. So you can have it running in a very, very small edge devices on the analytics. So that's what we see, where the world will go.
Are you guys seeing some of the same, or Thanos, go ahead, please.
Yeah, first of all, I like to say that we have also hundreds of assets in our company, of plants. When I say assets are of plants, more than 500 globally, and in each one of them we have some thousands of tags or sensors that capture information and send every minute. So we have more or less 1 billion data points every day that are adding today in our plants.
And you're manually inspecting each of those personally?
Yes, I do. Every morning I wake up and I do exactly.
Check on each one?
You got me. So it takes me just 1 or 2 hours, then I'm done.
Yeah.
So this is a fact. Of course, 5G is something that is going to change quite a lot of some stuff. On the other hand, we also insist quite a lot also on how should I say, on other stuff that need to be done, on other things that need to be done in order to get value out of our assets.
Yeah.
Right, and typically it's not just technology. Technology is one thing, but you need skills. You need the skills from people. If it's about analyzing data, so you go to data science, but it's not the only one. You need data engineers. You need IoT guys. You do more on the, let's say, go to the hardware, and all this set of skills that you need to either to bring, either to upgrade, to upskill. Then you need governance to make sure that you have a clear governance through the whole process. And then you need also infrastructure. So if it's about data, you need the data lakes, you need whatever you want. But please let us not forget to industry, when we are successful, we saw this in our company, where we have real successes, you need to bring this 3D, let's say, approach together. If not, you're just moving around in infrastructure and whatever. So there's a very nice equation brought by a professor called Theodoros Evgeniou, that's an MIT alumnus and now in INSEAD, one of the best schools in worldwide, business schools. And he taught us a simple equation. It says IT plus OO, IT everybody knows, OO, anyone? I give this for free. Old organization equals EOO. Well, what could it be? This EOO. Expensive organization. So if you just put money in IT and you don't have governance, you don't have new skills, you don't manage your change within the manufacturing industry, which is a big industry, forget it. Just throw your money away.
So let's dig a little bit deeper on that what, right? You mentioned you got about 1 billion endpoints or nodes to control, obviously predominantly automated, I'd like to hope and think. What are you guys trying to do? We heard a glimpse of predictive and conditional maintenance. Certainly, I think a number of us that are more on the kind of, call it vendor side of things, we see a lot of different use cases. So comments across the board. Maybe you can kick us off and then we can think a little bit about how Hugo Boss might go about doing some of these things. What use cases and implementations? And to your point, I think an important distinction that everyone in this room can identify with is moving from, to your point, POC or pilot to an actual production environment, not jeopardizing the production of whatever you're making, and actually rolling it out at scale. So maybe we can touch on a couple of those issues.
So as an end user, yes, I can answer this question. So I didn't expect the question, by the way, it just came out of the blue, but thank you for asking. So,
Sure.
Yeah. So yes, we're end users, we have a lot of data points. What do we do with them? So again, to go to scale, I take first of all, let me in 10 seconds speak about our strategy. It's called ACE, assets, customers, ecosystem. So it allows us, whenever we have a use case, to put it in the good cluster, I would say. Anyway, about the assets, we're in IoT environment. Our assets, we created a program that's called Smart Innovative Operations. It's a global program that runs through the whole company. So how do we make that? Did we make that? So we had in the beginning a global team, central team of experts that came from operations, that came from R&D, and that came also from the digital part, right? So we started thinking about and working on the predictive maintenance, is of course one of the big streams that we have. So we checked quite a lot of vendors that are there. We did some proof of concepts, as everyone, MVPs, and then we said, okay, we got it. For us, this is the software, this is the vendor that we want to deal with, okay? So we chose, and then we started. We have the same software everywhere on the globe, but we have what we call SIO centers, Smart Innovative Operation Centers. We have till now 4 of them, one in France, one in Kuala Lumpur, one in Shanghai,
Just to
one
clarify,
in Dubai.
did you start with a common platform and approach across, or was there a pain period where you took every pilot? Because I've seen a lot of different deployments, right?
No.
And kind of consolidated. Just a
So
curiosity.
we have, I mean, where the model stands is not the most important one in terms of, we have both clusters, I would say, that run locally, and then we have a system that brings all together. This is not the big thing. The big thing for us was to make sure that our experts, the global experts, let's say, the central ones, supervise and help the local ones in the SIO centers that develop the models. So we have, at the end of the day, after some time, 5,000 models in more than 160 sites.
Wow. Wow.
So with this global, I would say, a dual system, the global organization and the local development. So we go back and forth, and we make sure there's a development all over the company.
And it's kind of like a hub and spoke model. Well, let's come back to this in a moment. I'm curious if you can echo the same from your side, or could. Is it similar to almost like a hub and spoke, where you have a semi-centralized type of approach and dispel it across? And also, it sounds like you started with some of the similar set of use cases on the predictive maintenance side of things, start to notice the trends over time. Maybe you could comment on that on the Hugo Boss landscape.
Yeah. Before I mention about it, I'd like to a little bit go past and a little bit talk about our digital twin, because our AI initiative is based on this digital twin. And in this digital twin, we set our important pillars, components like machine, people, process, and product, which we call MPPP. So we just concentrate on those 4 pillars, and based on those 4 pillars, we initiate our AI studies. And based on these pillars, I can say that one of the most important topic or project is M2M, machine to machine. Because in our factory, we have roughly about 2,500 different machines. Most of them are sewing machines, dummy machines. But if you listen to them, then they can say something about the future to you, like preventive maintenance, like predicting the possible failures or utilization rates. So we initiate such a project, which also consists of data collection, of course, regarding IoT side. And then we start thinking about finding the utilization rate, and also finding possible failures in near future, like tomorrow, like next week. And other than that, another project which we have is line assignment. This is simply assignment between lines and the orders, which we produce in our lines. So what is the best match, perfect match, that we need to assign our orders to the lines? Because each and every line has its own characteristics. So each and every line can produce every order, but if you think about productivity, quality, delivery, then you need to think about, or you need to find the best match in between orders and lines, including the performance, the operators, and also the characteristic of the order, like fabric, like model, style, and so on. And this is the second one, which I can go in detail later on. And the third one, I could say, which we call A1 Plus, Project A1 Plus. This is something, the reduction of fabric consumption. This is also done in cutting area, and we are trying to find the best marker combination. Marker means the location or the placement of the fabric pieces in the fabric and in cutting area. So what is the best marker combination? So this is also done by the historical data. If you can find the best marker, then you can gain also fabric from the consumption. So with this project also, we just reduce headcount because of headcount labor, and then we use those headcounts in different areas. And other than that, we also increase the capacity of the cutters. And the next one is, which is very common for everybody, smart energy management. If you can collect the data from water, from natural gas, from electricity, then you can also think about any leakage. This is also something weird, but which we did is last year about leakage. Unfortunately, we couldn't have any leakage, fortunately, but we tested with the latest data, with historic data, and 2 years ago we had a leakage in water, and the algorithm found it perfectly.
Wow.
And we are waiting for any leakage in front of us, but we don't
Fantastic.
have any yet.
So you started touching on ROI, and I'd love to broaden and expand on that across the group, and maybe Saeed and Kari too, if you have some thoughts on ROI, right? I mean, ideally you start a project with an end goal in mind. The fact that we're all gainfully employed and you're all executives in your respective organizations leads me to believe that things are going fairly well. So what is it that you originally set out to achieve with some of these? You started touching on some of it, and did you achieve it, right? Did it work? And any thoughts on that and how you've seen clients skillfully start, right? I mean, if someone who raised their hand who said, yes, I'm in manufacturing, but didn't raise their hand when I said, are you doing anything in ML or AI? What would you tell them? Where do you get started?
Yeah,
right?
no, that's a good point, Calvin. I think, and you and I debated quite a bit about monetization, right?
Yes.
At the end of the day,
Yeah.
if you're going to gather all that data, and it will cost you, it's very expensive.
Yep.
It requires a lot of resources from both an IT and an OT point of view, and from the use of ML and AI. So that's the first point. And then the second, if you're doing that without that ROI in mind, the monetization will be very difficult to do. In a lot of cases, because we're talking about these processes, particularly in manufacturing, one of the areas where we've seen success is a reduction in the turnaround. So basically, you are improving your manufacturing process, and you're doing that on a daily basis, pretty much in some of these examples, and that seemed to be amazing. I mean, it's a great way to look at it. And this morning, for those of you who are here for the keynote from McLaren, that's a really interesting example where we kind of experimented with this whole notion of, like you were saying, around using not only the notion of digital twin, but the digital twin becoming the master, in a sense that it actually is taking over your physical environment where you trust it more than that. Now your ROI is way over the board. Yeah, that's kind of one of the examples I would give.
Great perspective.
Yeah, if I can comment from our side, so as I said, we started our digital transformation 11 years ago. And the fact were that as the business model, how do we deliver the services is that we basically sell three things: the speed of the connection, the quality of the service, and SLA. That's all what we sell. So then you pay a price for that. So it's going to be up and running 99.999% of all the time. So that, when we started our journey and where we are now, and we are not stopped with the journey. Last year, we repaired, we had the predictive maintenance over 80% of all incidents in our network, everything.
Wow.
The 70% of the absolute incidents have been coming down, based on using analytics, software, robots, and so forth. So nowadays, in a traditional network operation center, we have 0 people it's all automated. And because there's so much data that actually no human can anymore handle it. But it doesn't mean that there's no people involved anymore. There are people involved, because then again, they need to analyze and check that if the results, what the machine learning, deep learning is giving, is it actually right, or not right? And that gives us a possibility, for example, if we have a certain area in certain part of Helsinki or anywhere in Finland, there's like a summer concert or whatever. People are coming more and more intense in a certain area. We can automatically put more data available in that spot and then release it automatically. And there's no people to have to do that.
Yeah.
So think about that level of automation and then put that the same level what you can do in the factory floor. Because it's not, like you said, it's not just the OEEs of the machine, but it's the processes, it's the people waste, it's the process waste, it's all that which you need to analyze. It's just not how the machine is performing, but how your processes are performing.
Right, the whole ecosystem. Any other thoughts? Otherwise, I would like to open it up to the audience if we could. I have more questions. I will torture you with plenty more questions. But I want to see, I've enjoyed the conversation thus far. I hope you have too. Anything that this has spurred in terms of thoughts from your perspective? Questions, comments, concerns? And I will check back in with you periodically every 30 seconds for the rest of the panel. So hopefully someone has something they want to ask. For the folks who raised their hand and said, yes, we're dabbling in ML or AI, comments are also possible. I'm not positive we have, I think we have a mic somewhere around. We have a mic up here. Show of hands, any questions at this point? Okay, all right, well, we'll come back and check. But the next question, I think this dovetails well. This whole, and I don't want to get into the rise of the machines, Terminator type of conversation here by any means, but it dovetails well when you're talking about the skills, the people, the shifting and changing nature of roles, and a number of, you touched on the skills required in this new age world too. In the US we'd call him Joe. You got Joe factory worker, he's been in there 30 years. When something is vibrating, Joe doesn't need a sensor because Joe knows that that thing is vibrating. So ultimately at the end of the day, and this is just my own myopic perspective, if we can get ML and AI and to some extent DL, but that'll be pushing more large amounts of data from the back end, to figure out how Joe does that, that's really hard to do. I'm curious what your thoughts are. I mean, how evolved are some of the algorithms that are being applied to the degree where you can have some of that institutional knowledge to kind of broker what Joe knows versus what kind of a more traditional kind of lower fidelity algorithm might do. Just general thoughts on that. And it doesn't have to be Joe. It can be Guillermo. It can be he can have whatever name you want. Giuseppe.
Okay. In our case, we like to think of of AI not just as artificial intelligence, but also as augmented intelligence. So, machine learning, AI, call it as you like, can help also the humans to be more efficient in their jobs. It's true that Joe doesn't touch the machine anymore to have the vibrations and so forth, which was kind of an image. Joe didn't do that in the past neither. He did some other stuff. So there's some upskilling to do, but we like to think this as a progress globally of the workforce. Again, is the machines that augment the human intelligence and power rather than destroy it. So we're optimistic about that. So in the SIO, Smart Innovative Operations case that I described a little bit earlier, we used again, let's say, development of machine learning plus the expertise of our experts, operators, etc., to bring this forward. So we need the humans. So humans for us are in the center. In a different way, as in an augmented way, as we say, more and more than in the past. But they're still there. And to be honest, I've had, thanks to my very nice job that I have, to get in touch with people that have a very high level in artificial intelligence, I don't want to mention any one of them, but a lot of discussions. And what we call the general artificial intelligence is quite far away from today's reality. It's kind of what we call artificial intelligence today. Everybody knows it works a little differently than the human brain, right?
Sure.
It's based on a lot of data, of big data. Human brain works with some very little data. So the mechanisms are very different. So there are a lot of the big brains of humanity work on how we learn in different ways, how we explore on the small data, let's say, to do the artificial intelligence. But there's a big discussion. But augmenting, yes. The human intelligence. We like that.
Oh, Kari, please, yeah.
Yeah, so my comment is also the thing that, you need to then start to trust the data.
Yeah.
And I think that's the biggest, that was the kind of a challenge, biggest challenge what we had. And when we then deliver solutions to our customers, it's like, you all know that there are two types of analytics. The ones where you get the result which supports your own idea, or the result which says that you're wrong.
Right.
So which one you trust?
Right.
And then if the analytics gives you another result which is different than what you have been thinking it's right, then you're in the right track. Right. But then, in the long term, it means that the Joe cannot manually anymore change the configurations in the machines. They just need to leave them like that. Or the better is that you implement a software which can actually automatically reconfigure the machines or processes. So now, not only getting the results, but also changing the, configurations. And then you're in the right track.
Are you seeing customers, or that you have clients in Finland and beyond where they're reaching that higher level of maturity? That level of trust is so high. And Joe, maybe he's retiring. It's been 30 years. He's had a long career. But still, I mean, where Joes are going, okay, I trust the data. That's fine. That's a hard thing, right?
Yeah, so one of our largest customers is Procter & Gamble. So currently what they call the end-to-end sync, the software, which is, by the way, ranked one of the best industrial IoT solution, that's delivered by us. So it's currently running now in 10 factories, and they have a rollout for 100 factories. But the interesting thing is that even so that you have like a company like Procter & Gamble, they have standardized software. They use Wonderware, they use GE Prophecy, they use SAP, all that. But different countries has implemented them in a different way.
Yeah.
So again, it's just not just you would roll it out like that, because you need to understand what the country, what that factory is actually running, what is the results, what they want to gain. But basically, if we now monitor more or less 150 KPIs in real time, and doing that from the inbound to outbound, and all the line operations and all material flows and all that stuff, it has changed dramatically the way how you operate the factories.
And that's interesting, that mass customization type of approach based on different geographical preferences, the preferences of individual VPs of operations or regional managers. I'm curious, that kind of brings us to you, and you touched on some of this earlier too, Thanos, the skill sets that you're hiring for today. 10 years ago, would Air Liquide have said, oh yeah, no, we need IoT architects. So there's this notion of hiring internally versus outsourcing and hiring people, SIs and others that can stitch these things together for you. Do you see your companies evolving to be, digital companies, right? And is that just part and parcel where you're bringing a lot of this in? Are you kind of relinquishing some of that control and focusing on the core? I'm curious what your general comments would be about that.
Yeah, as Hugo was, after we initiate our AI studies, we create a team which we call AI team. And formerly we didn't have any team like that. And then it consists of some data scientists and data engineers right now. And of course, the world is changing. So the new jobs, new expectations, and new competencies are coming. And of course, the new generation is trying to in line with these expectations. So from our point of view, yeah, we already initiated such shift in our IT side and also for the other white collars as well. And on the other side, we start also an initiation which we call the Global Solutions. And this is something like giving the consultancy to the other companies about our experience in not just in AI, on all the other topics as well. I think this is something like changing the business model as well. I mean,
Right.
our core competency, our core business model is ongoing, but on the other side, the companies are looking for new opportunities, new strategies, and as far as I see that most of the business models will a little bit change into IT background or a little bit enlarge IT, maybe data scientists, statistics, robotics, mechatronics, and if we call them all digitalization. So most of the new business models will rely on such kind of digitalization, I think, in the near future.
And that's kind of that shift that, Kari, you kind of kicked off the talk about too on reskilling as well. I mean, part of that is reskilling some of the folks that may have originally been in one part of the business to learn some of the new technologies and be able to look at it from a slightly different angle. Granted, some of them are net new skill sets too. Any other comments or thoughts on that note?
Yes, if I might make a comment here, it's one of the most difficult questions to find for each company to find the appropriate business model that we need. In our case, we're trying to capture, to get the best of both worlds. This means we have a quite thriving, I guess, ecosystem, as we call it, of small companies, startups, that with many of them we do, for instance, proof of concepts, etc. We have, in our case, in R&D, we are liaising and we're working with big universities in the area of data science, like Carnegie Mellon in the US, with Princeton, with École Polytechnique in France, and so forth. So to make sure we have access to very high level people knowledge. We have also an incubator now in our innovation centers, as we call them. There are no research centers anymore. We call these innovation campuses. So in innovation campuses, we have R&D, but we have also people from business lines. So we're creating an internal ecosystem, and so we have incubators, startups that come and join us, and we work in a collaborative mode. So you cannot walk this path alone. On the other hand, we don't believe, and at least I say I don't believe, it's my personal opinion, that 100% externalization can work neither. Right. Sometimes then it's very difficult to import. Let's say if the people go, and this is something that I read in the Harvard Business Review not so much time ago, that some of the digital transformation in companies failed because people put money, used consultants to do 100% of the work. Then they left. They did a very good work. But after 6 months after that, all the systems need maintenance. You need to make sure that you know how to use it, and mainly, and also to make them evolve over time. So if you don't have that, the systems fall. So I think you need to combine all that. Consultants are very useful, for instance, to make companies understand that they're not unique. They can also learn from others, things that have happened to others, worked to others, and didn't work, and so forth. So you need to make the good, put this in the pot, make the good recipient, and get out with something. I think we got it quite right in our case.
Great point. So I know we only have 2 minutes left, and I'm going to ask like a really heavy question. I'm going to ask everyone to limit themselves to roughly 30-second answers. Okay? So sorry, but data monetization at the end of the day. You now know so much about your own operations, and we're supporting companies to help them learn so much about their own operations. What are you going to do with all that data? Are you going to keep it all internal? Are you eventually looking to sell it, create your own platform? Are you looking to do product to service transformation? And in the 30-second tidbits from the Elisa and the Dell side of things, maybe a little bit of brief perspective on, well, how can we help people do that, right? If that makes sense. Fair? Brief answers. And apologies. This is because you didn't ask questions, so I had to sneak in another good one.
So I'll start. I'll be quick. 30 seconds. Wow. Okay. So basically, yeah, it needs to be monetized because it's like I said earlier, the infrastructure behind it, despite all the efforts and the innovation that we're making and the great platforms at the enterprise level they put together, it's still a cost and there's still a need to get that to that level where monetizing it, you'll get the funding to support it. But that in itself is not the only answer, right? Being able to share some of that data. A lot of the data is actually something you can share so that you can leverage a federated learning from that perspective, like some of those examples we talked about, distributed environments. So that's also, I think, equally important, Calvin. So those are, I think, where we're looking at.
Great perspective.
It's definitely
I think you're at 42 seconds, though, unfortunately. No, it's but no, excellent point. And the ecosystem play that you touched upon. Please, yeah, Kari.
Yeah, so for us, it's nice to be a telecom company. So we know what web pages you browse, we know where you are moving, which shops you go, and all that stuff. But in all the customer data is owned by customer, but we can enrich that data by the location information, certain demography of women 30 years old, buying a Boss suit. Where do they actually go? How do they commute from their home to work and all that? So to give more data on top of the customer data.
Got it. Thank you. Well, that was, I think, 47 seconds. So unfortunately, you guys can only say yes or no. No, I'm kidding. Very brief responses from both of you as well. Thoughts? I mean, you want to monetize this data? Are you at that stage yet? Are you eventually going to do it? Or is it not on the roadmap?
Yeah, actually, in Hugo Boss, as I said, we use the data for MPPP and we collect lots of data. And of course, it is too much valuable for us. And you can see from the use cases. But I'd like to conclude my speech with another question. If you can produce your own data without it occurs. I mean, this is also an open gate for the AI, which is called reinforcement learning. And you can produce your data without collecting. So this is also another paradigm change, which we will talk in near future quite a lot.
Thank you very much. Thanos, you want to take us home?
Just go looking at it.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, thank you all. It's glaring red at us, so thank you so much for bearing in there with us. Hope everyone enjoys the rest of the show. And thanks to our wonderful panelists as well, of course. Sorry to be so brief.